So today I'm going to do something a little bit different in that, on a regular basis I say this. I always pray, search my heart, show me your ways, and use me for your glory. And this week, after I got done writing my sermon, I prayed that same prayer, and God said, John, he nudged it on my heart. He said, I want you to pastor the church. I want you to shepherd them. And not just in a teaching way, but over the past couple of years, we as a church have gone through some really, not as a church, but as a country and as a world, have gone through some really tough things. You think about the last 2 years. No one has ever gone through a pandemic here. Who's here? And we actually went through a pandemic over the last couple of years. It's called COVID. And as we went through that reshaped our lives. It reshaped how we do things. It reshaped how we communicate, how we connect. Most of you had maybe heard of Zoom, and now Zoom's part of life. We learned that wearing masks sucks. And if you didn't know that before, it's double down. And if you like it, good for you. But the rest of us hate it. And that's okay. It's a personal choice. I'm just saying, but I personally hate it. Found out I'm deaf. Like I can't hear people. And they're like, I don't know. Write it down. Like it's just awful. But I've also had the opportunity over the last 6 months. I've led a lot of other pastors. I've led our staff here through it, led some other staffs through a process to actually kind of process what happened over the last 2 years. To think through the events that happened, that we can think through and process it as a group. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call up 4 people. Don't have anything scripted here. And if no one volunteers, it'll be a voluntold session. So that means I will call on you, and because of guilt and shame, you will come up here. And we leverage that not very often. But I want to walk us through a series of questions. So I need 4 volunteers, 2 men and 2 women, preferably of different ages here that I want to get for men and women to actually help come up and process this. Shane, I see your hand up. Yes, you're coming up. I don't care if you're scratching your head. You're coming up. I saw that. All right, someone else? Okay, you can come up too. That's fine. Come on up. Okay, I need a teenager. Come on. Yes, you come on up. Come on. Come on up. And I need another female. Okay. Did I see hands? Did you raise your hand? Yes, you did. Come on up then. You raise it. There's no backing down. Your hand goes up. That's it. Okay. So I'm like Jimmy Fallon on this side, and you guys get to be on that side. And so here's what we're going to do is I'm going to ask questions. Thank you for coming up. That was that voluntold part when you looked at me. Just wanted to help you understand what that is. So, but I want to talk through this. And the reason I'm doing this, and by the way, online, for you online, type in your responses to these questions in the chat, all right? So you have plenty of opportunity to do that. Put the answers to your questions in the chat so people can actually engage with what you're talking about. So here's the 4 questions. Now, as I ask this panel, you'll be able to think of, your own answers in your head. And so thinking of the last 2 years, and we don't have to go in order, you can just kind of raise your hand, but thinking of the last 2 years, out of all that we went through with the pandemic, with COVID, with the elections, with the debate between wearing masks and not wearing masks, and all of the tension that we went through, I want you to think about this question and answer it. It's this. What did you love about the last 2 years? What did you love about the last 2 years? I'll go first to give you an example what I'm looking for. So for what I loved about it is that life slowed down for us. We were able to eat together, Kathy and I and our 2 girls, son's married, so we were able to eat more together. And Kathy and I spent more time together. I learned how to cook. And I'm the bomb diggity now when it comes to barbecue. But I learned that I love smoking meats. And I love that part of it. I love the fact that we can be super creative here at church. Those are just some of the things that I loved about the last 2 years. What about you?
I didn't raise my hand. I can name lots of things I don't love, but what do I love about what was going on? I think about the time with my family. So if I were reflecting on the last 2 years, the time we spent in the kitchen together with all 5 of us with our hands in the cooking bowls and making a mess and looking up recipes that just sound awful, but we do it anyhow, and doing the dishes. So spending time together as a family in the kitchen.
Okay.
I did love that.
It's awesome. All right.
I live alone, so when COVID hit, I was scared to death. Had no idea what I was going to do. And it was interesting because I did something that I've just learned to do recently, and that was I said, God, show me. Because I can't do this alone. This is going to kill me. And I love the fact that I met so many new people. And I got closer to my mother, and I have never had a relationship. And I decided, you know what? Instead of wanting the relationship, I'm going to just start talking to her. And we talk every day.
Wow.
And, and I got to tell the people in my life that I really care about them. Not just yeah, I love you, but why and how much.
Wow.
And I got closer with, I have 6 boys, and I got closer with all of my children, even though they don't live here. So, yeah, and the one thing I did not do is I did not fall in love with Zoom.
Okay. We have more questions, so we just stick to what do we love about it right now. Oh, that's good. That's good.
I think what I learned to love about the past 2 years was the lessons learned, overcoming difficulties of COVID and what that meant from working from home, being close to family as much as it was hard sometimes, and then the lessons learned and the realization that no matter how bad things are, it's really not too bad.
Okay.
I remember you doing service from in your garage. And I would wake up on Sunday mornings and go into the living room, and my whole family would sit there and watch church, and I loved that. And we would stand and sing as much as we could, and I don't know, that just made me happy. It was like the one thing that stayed the same.
Okay, so that's what you love. That's awesome. You can hold that. So there were some things, even in the midst of tragedy, that we did love. Like, maybe they're unexpected blessings that came from it. And it's good to pause for a minute and just think about the things over the last 2 years that we did love. Because it's easy to forget that. And by reflecting on it, it helps us to draw out our own feelings, especially for men. We have a lot of emotions surrounding this, but it's good to unpack that. So the next question might be a little bit easier, seems to be. What did you hate about it? What did you hate about the last 2 years? And you can't ramble, but pick a couple of things where you go, I hated this. And it's open. So what did you hate about the last 2 years?
I hated online school and not being able to see my friends a lot. That sucked.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's very valid, very fair. A lot of people missed out on their senior high school sports, senior prom, even graduation ceremonies, and that there's a loss there. And that's fair to hate that. Yep.
I hated the amount of control a few put on so many.
Where do I start? Oh, what did I hate? As an elementary school teacher, the procedures that were thrown out. There were so many unknowns. They're in class, they're 6 feet apart, they wear a mask. Okay, now they're 3 feet apart. Oops, back to 6 feet apart. Now they're sending them home. No mask now, I can see their face, but they're two-dimensional. Can't touch them, can't hug them, can point at them, but they don't know I'm smiling. It's just, I didn't like that. I couldn't love my students. I couldn't be me. I couldn't be Shane Weber to them. Mr. Weber, I couldn't do it. What did I hate about it? I felt super isolated. I need people to be energized. and I didn't have people to be energized. And this COVID brought me down, brought me super down. I mean, to a point now depression hit me. A fog. I started experiencing this fog around me where I didn't notice people's faces anymore. I didn't see people. And I'd walk down the hall, I would walk down my street, and I just didn't see people's faces. It was a fog. My head was low, my hands in my pocket. That is so not me. That was not me. So I got some help. I'm on medication now. I have a counselor, and COVID made me depressed. Holy buckets. So I'm on meds. If anybody want to talk about it with me, talk to me. I'll listen to you. It's all great. It's a journey. It's what it is. So that's what I hate.
Yeah, thanks
It
for being
sucks.
honest.
It's so low. The fog is gone, but people are exhausting now.
Thank you, Shane.
Can't beat that.
Oh, no, you don't have to.
What did I hate about? I hated the judgment. I hated the separateness. I hated the masks. I hated that I couldn't touch people. Living alone, the only time I would, is when I'd hug a friend or, we'd hold hands and things like that for different reasons, and nobody would touch you. And it felt really, really lonely. I hated not being able to go support people in the hospital. I hated not being able to see people when they were in need. I guess I shouldn't think about it a whole lot because my list could get longer.
Yeah, I hated the fact that I lost my good friend Van Johnson, who was on staff here from COVID. And I miss him dearly. I hated that. And I hated the fact that we couldn't even have funerals, or the ones we had were just, people couldn't grieve. I hated the fact that I couldn't go to the hospital to see people. I hated the fact that some people died alone other than our first responders who were around them. That just breaks my heart. And I hated the division in our country over some of it just really stupid things. And some based on fear and some based on fact, and it just got all muddled up. So yeah, I hated that too. And I did hate masks because I realized I'm more deaf than I thought. And I really can't hear unless I'm looking at someone's face and watching their mouth do this. So that was very hard for me. So there's things that we loved about it. There's definitely things that we hate about it. And I hope you're interacting on the chat with this. But there's also another question, and it's this. In all of this 2 years of grappling with what we've gone through, what did you learn about God? In the midst of all of this, what did you learn about God? Now, I say that because some people who claim to be Christians just walked away from their faith. A lot of them just, a lot went to church or called themselves Christians, but they really weren't. They just did like a social function. Others, their faith was incredibly deepened during this time because of a new reliance on God. Some people said God is faithful. But what about you personally? What did you personally learn about God and your relationship with Him over the last 2 years? Anyone want to go first?
Wow, that's a good question. What I learned about God was He is so much bigger than I ever thought He was. I'm blessed to be around a lot of people that, their response to life is run to God. Run to gratitude, look for the good things. I learned that God knows what He's doing and He does not need my help. I applied to be His personal assistant. I haven't heard back yet. and I learned that everything does happen for a reason. God doesn't do the world to please me. And so it's my job to trust and have faith in Him. And so I guess what I learned about God is I need Him big time.
Man. Awesome. Who wants to go next? Doesn't matter. You can pass it on or hold it.
What I learned about God was the only thing I can control in my life, and I mean the only thing I can control, is my relationship with Him. Learning that everything else is out of my control is really hard for me to take as a red-blooded man. But surrendering and being willing and accepting to take that and give it to God was something that I had learned.
I learned that God is always there, like no matter
amen.
where you are, and He's everywhere. He's always there. And I started reading my Bible a lot more because I had so much time, and I just got a lot closer to God.
Awesome.
What did I learn about God? I learned that I'm not in control as much as I want to be. You know, and I know that God has a plan I don't understand, generally. Because, you know, I experienced this fog, and I'm on meds, and now I think, here's what I know. God's going to use that moment. What I've gone through, now I can empathize and sympathize with someone else. I think God has equipped me for something in the future that's coming that I don't know about, and maybe it's one of my own children. Maybe one of my own children are going to go through this, and I can talk to them with my heart, because I wouldn't have been able to before, or my neighbor. So it's maybe God's humorous way of equipping me. I don't like it. But I learned a lot about God, trusting Him and His plan, and I hope He uses this, because He needs to use this. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
All right.
Yeah, I learned that, you know, that we always talk about the rain falling on the righteous and the unrighteous. And this time everybody experienced it because nobody was immune. And it affected all of us. And I learned that God says it doesn't matter how good your life is or how bad your life is, are you still serving me? Because God is still on His throne. And sometimes it takes some trials in our life to basically break up the hard soil so that things can grow. And so I learned about God, that God is faithful and that God is the one that we can count on. It's not government, it's not politicians, it's not money or things or stuff. It's putting my trust in God. And God is always there. He's always been there. And this kind of drew that out for me. And so one last question is this. It's what did you learn about yourself? Through this whole mess of the last 2 years, what did you learn about you that maybe you didn't even really know? I'll go first. I don't like change as much as I thought I did. Because when it's forced on me, I hate it. I hated wearing masks. I stuck out my tongue sometimes just because I was mad. No one could tell. And I learned that, you know, about myself, that I do need to be more adjustable, that I need to have a greater empathy for other people who see things differently than me. That really stretched me. And as a pastor, that I learned for myself that I need to care about people no matter what side of the road they fall on, or political spectrum, or age, or I need to be the hands and feet of Christ to whoever. And God has made that abundantly clear to me over the last couple of years. I learned that it's kind of a new me that I really need to move into this role. And so it's been good. So what did you learn about yourself?
What did I learn about myself was I used to be able to be everything to everyone always. And I learned now I have a circuit breaker that trips. And I think it's okay. I think it's okay. That's what I learned about myself is I have my circuit breaker trips, and I just need to think about myself.
So is that when you say circuit breaker trips,
Yep.
Can you unpack that a
I've learned, so when I sit with somebody and they share with me about something that is deep and concerning, I grab onto that and I carry it with me. I'd carry them with me. More than just care, I'd carry them. And I'd think about them, and then another person, whether it's their marriage. I have some friends that are suicidal. I have friends that are trying to get rid of alcoholism. Well, you can't get rid of it, but we talk about that. And I carry them around, and I'm no good for God if I'm fried. I can't help his kingdom. So
thank you, Shane.
Yeah, my circuit trips, and I'm worthless. But I'm glad I have a circuit breaker now.
Yeah, it's called self-care. Yeah, good.
Self-care.
All right, who else? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about yourself? Just hand it to someone. There you go.
I guess I learned I'm not as powerful as I thought I was. I'm not as smart as I thought I was, and I am definitely not in control as I thought I was. I learned more about compassion. I learned instead of when someone was, I thought that I was really, really good at, loving everybody all the time, but when somebody bit my head off about my mask or something, I realized that I got really defensive, and so I learned that wasn't going to help. And being mad at somebody because they're scared and I'm scared doesn't do any good. I learned I reacted in fear a lot. So I'm working on that. I learned how important my family is to me, my friends, my relationships. Because when it came down to it, and I'm sitting at home by myself, and you can't go anywhere, and you can't do anything, and I'm sorry, but I'm anti-technology. So, I learned how much I need other people.
Yeah.
I thought that I was really strong and independent, and I didn't need anybody, but I do. And so, yeah, I think that's what I learned.
Okay.
I learned that I had been living my life extremely selfishly, and the realization came to me that that's not the way I wanted to be. And that was kind of hard to take after almost 40 years of living the same way. And I learned that people can change, give things up, accept things, and move on and grow. You're really never too old to learn.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I learned that I wasn't really who I thought I was. Like, I changed a lot just being in my house. And I thought I was one person, but I came out of quarantine and I was a completely different person in a much more positive way.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. You want to unpack that a little bit?
No.
No? That's a fair answer. So I understand that. That's good.
Not with my parents right there.
Not with your parents right here. Yes, I understand. You say it's just between us and everyone else. So, well, that's really good. It's good to process this stuff. So give a round of applause to our volunteers. Thank you. You did good. All right. Good job. Thank you. So as you heard what they said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this, what they said, and you bring it to your table. You bring it to your circles at work or in your home or with your friends, because it really does help us to process what we went through. And now we just did that exercise together. Hopefully in your own head you were thinking, here's what I loved, here's what I hated, here's what I thought was, what I learned about God, what I learned about myself. But let me just kind of tie it together. So there are seasons of life that we go through. These are called kairos seasons. Chronos seasons are chronological, clock and calendar. Kairos are seasons, like fall is a season, winter's a season, summer is a season. There's a time for war, a time for peace. That's exactly what Ecclesiastes says in chapter 3. King Solomon writes this. He says, For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. So if we look at verse 7, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak. Many of us are having a hard time accepting today because we're still lamenting yesterday. We're still mourning over what was, the way things used to be. And in reality, our world is never going to go back to the way it was pre-COVID. COVID will be with us forever. It'll just come up with new names and they'll be scarier and we'll have better remedies for them, but it's not going away. And the way things were, we have to mentally say, okay, that's what was. That's why we just did these 4 questions. Because that brings us to the present. And when we're in the present, we can acknowledge our feelings, and that allows us to step into the future to say, okay, we were there, we processed it, but now, God, we are going to look forward, and this came out a couple of times, where God is going to use this for His glory. We don't know what it is. We know that there's a lot of hurt that was related to the past, but now we're in the present, and by grieving what was and processing it, we're able to look forward to what is, because God isn't done with you yet. He's not done with your family. He's not done with your kids. He's not done with your siblings. He's not done working in your life. So we remember that that was a season that we went through. That was a season that you went through. And it's a lot easier to process the fact that it was a season if you put some bookends on it. Like it started at this time, and from this day forward, I'm going to say it's going to end. It's going to end, and now I'm going to look forward to the future. Because God really is in control. And we need to trust Him each and every step of each and every day. And in doing so, we'll grow closer to Him, and we'll take some of these lessons, things that we love, things that we hate, and we'll learn from it and move forward. So I really do encourage you to take these 4 questions to your groups, to your friends, with your kids. Parents, don't forget, your kids went through a major life event. Most of them dealt with it by playing video games and watching TikTok. Seriously. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. That's how people we deal with. We always go back to what's called our familiar friend. Whatever it was that brings us comfort, we go back to that. Whether it's good or bad, we go back to it. But help your own family and your own relations around you process what we went through. And from this day forward, we say, God, we understand what we went through. We didn't necessarily like it. There were some things that we liked, a lot of things that we hated, but we learned more about you and more about ourselves. And in doing so, it's going to help you step into your next chapter that is yet to be written. Heavenly Father, help us this day to bring you glory. And all that we've gone through has just been so difficult. And I know for me, God, as you and I had many conversations, I couldn't win with wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, voting for this person, voting for that person, not supposed to like this person, not supposed to like that. God, you know how that just tore my heart apart, and I just felt so lost. And now I thank you, God, that you brought me to where I am and our church to where we are. And today we look forward to an even better tomorrow. We know that the world is in chaos and that there's war, but we also have learned a valuable lesson that you are still in control. And to you be all the glory. And all God's people said or typed, Amen. Amen.